May 9th, 1864, Spotsylvania Courthouse, Virginia. The Civil War has been raging for 3 brutal years. On this morning, one man will speak his final words. Words that will echo through history, not for their wisdom, but for their terrible irony. This is the story of Major General John Sedgwick, a man beloved by his troops, respected by his enemies, and destined to become the highest-ranking Union officer killed in the entire Civil War. But he won't be remembered most for his military achievements. He'll be remembered for what he said, just moments before a sharpshooter's bullet proved him fatally wrong. John Sedgwick was born in Cornwall Hollow, Connecticut, in 1813, into a family with deep roots in American history. His ancestors had arrived in Massachusetts in 1635, and his family believed in service to their country. In 1830, at just 17 years old, Sedgwick entered the United States Military Academy at West Point. He graduated in 1837, ranked 24th in a class of 50. Among his classmates were men who would become both his brothers in arms and his adversaries, including future Confederate generals. Sedgwick's early military career took him across the American frontier. He fought in the Seminole Wars in Florida, served in the Mexican-American War, where he was brevetted for gallantry at the Battle of Contreras and Churubusco, and spent years on the harsh frontier of Kansas and the Dakotas, fighting in the Indian Wars. By 1860, the nation was fracturing. When southern states began seceding after Abraham Lincoln's election, Sedgwick faced the same agonizing choice as thousands of other military officers. Which side would he choose? Unlike many of his Southern classmates, Sedgwick never wavered. He remained loyal to the Union. By April 1861, when Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter, Major Sedgwick was ready to defend his country. Sedgwick's rise through Union ranks was swift. His courage was unquestioned, his competence clear. By February 1862, he was promoted to Major General of Volunteers and given command of a division in the Army of the Potomac. But it was his character that truly set him apart. Sedgwick genuinely cared for his men. He was known for his kindness, his accessibility, and his willingness to share the hardships of camp life with ordinary soldiers. His troops gave him a nickname that captured their affection: Uncle John. Uncle John wasn't just a term of endearment. It was a mark of deep respect. In an era when many generals treated their soldiers as expendable resources, Sedgwick saw them as men with families, hopes, and fears. That made him extraordinary. But affection from his troops couldn't shield Sedgwick from the brutal reality of Civil War combat. And in the summer of 1862, he would face his bloodiest test: the Peninsula Campaign. General George McClellan's ambitious plan to capture Richmond by approaching from the southeast. Sedgwick's division was in the thick of the fighting. September 17, 1862. Antietam. The single bloodiest day in American history. Nearly 23,000 casualties in a single day of fighting. Sedgwick led his division into an area that would become known as the West Woods. What happened next was catastrophic. Sedgwick's division walked into a Confederate ambush. Attacked from 3 sides by superior numbers, his men were devastated. Of the 5,000 soldiers Sedgwick led into the West Woods, more than 2,200 were killed, wounded, or captured in less than half an hour. And Sedgwick himself? He was hit twice. One bullet tore through his wrist. Another ripped into his shoulder. As his men carried him from the field, he was bleeding heavily, his arm mangled. Many thought he wouldn't survive. But Uncle John was tougher than he looked. After months of painful recovery, he returned to active duty in December 1862. His arm still weak, but his spirit unbroken. July 1863. Gettysburg. The war's turning point. Sedgwick's 6th Corps performed a forced march of 34 miles in 17 hours to reach the battlefield. Though they arrived too late for the first 2 days of fighting, they helped secure the Union victory on the 3rd day. By the spring of 1864, Sedgwick commanded the 6th Corps under General Ulysses S. Grant, the Union's new general-in-chief. Grant had a plan to end the war through relentless, grinding pressure on Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. It was called the Overland Campaign. Beginning in May 1864, Grant would drive south toward Richmond, forcing Lee to fight battle after battle, wearing down the Confederate Army through attrition. The campaign's second major engagement would be at a crossroads called Spotsylvania Courthouse, and there, Uncle John's War would end. May 9, 1864. Dawn breaks over Spotsylvania Courthouse, Virginia. The Battle of Spotsylvania has already been raging for several days. The fighting has been brutal, even by Civil War standards.
Union forces are attempting to break through Confederate defensive lines. Lee's men have built extensive earthworks, trenches, and fortifications that make frontal assault nearly suicidal. General John Sedgwick rises early, as always. At 50 years old, he's one of the oldest Corps commanders in the Union Army. He's fought in more battles than most men can count. He's been wounded. He's seen thousands die. He knows the risks of war intimately. But this morning, he's in good spirits. Sedgwick's 6th Corps holds a position on the Union right flank. His mission today is to position artillery to support an assault planned for later in the day. It's routine work, important, but not particularly dangerous. Or so it seems. About 1,000 yards away, Confederate sharpshooters have taken positions. These aren't ordinary soldiers taking random shots. They're elite marksmen, armed with long-range rifles with telescopic sights, capable of accurate fire at distances that would astound earlier generations of soldiers. The Whitworth rifle, manufactured in England, could hit targets reliably at 1,000 yards. In the hands of a skilled shooter, it was a lethal precision instrument. Around 9 a.m., Sedgwick rides forward to inspect his line and oversee the positioning of his artillery. Confederate sharpshooters spot the activity and begin firing. Their bullets whistle through the air, striking near Union positions. Sedgwick's men, veterans all, duck instinctively. They've learned to respect the danger of sharpshooters. But their general seems unconcerned. Sedgwick has been under fire countless times. He's survived Antietam. He's led men through hell and back. Perhaps he's become, like many long-serving soldiers, somewhat fatalistic. Or perhaps he simply believes his luck will hold. His staff officers urge him to take cover. The general waves them off. Sedgwick laughs at his men, dodging the distant fire. "What?" he says, his voice carrying across the position. "Men dodging this way for single bullets? What will you do when they open fire along the whole line?" Then, seeing his soldiers still flinching at the sound of bullets passing by, Sedgwick speaks the words that will define his legacy. Words meant to encourage. Words meant to show courage. Words spoken with absolute confidence. They couldn't hit an elephant at this distance. The words are barely past his lips when a sharpshooter's bullet, fired from nearly 1,000 yards away, strikes General John Sedgwick just below his left eye. Uncle John falls. His staff officers rush to him, but there's nothing to be done. The bullet has penetrated his skull and lodged in his brain. Major General John Sedgwick is dead before he hits the ground. The elephant, it turns out, was not so hard to hit after all. The news of Sedgwick's death spreads quickly through Union lines. Soldiers who loved him are stunned. Officers who served with him are heartbroken. When word reaches General Ulysses S. Grant, he can hardly believe it. "Is he really dead?" Grant asks. When told yes, Grant responds that Sedgwick's loss is greater than the loss of a whole division of troops. Sedgwick's body was taken to his home in Cornwall Hollow, Connecticut, where he was buried with full military honors. He never married, had no children, but he left behind thousands of soldiers who considered him a father figure. John Sedgwick earned a grim distinction. He remains the highest-ranking Union officer killed in action during the entire Civil War. His death occurred just 13 months before Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. But it's not his rank, his battles, or even his death that people remember most about John Sedgwick. It's those final words. They couldn't hit an elephant at this distance. Sedgwick's last words have become legendary precisely because of their tragic irony. They represent something profound about human nature, our tendency toward overconfidence, our inability to truly accept our own mortality, even when danger is literally whistling past our ears. Today, at Spotsylvania Courthouse, a marker stands near the spot where General Sedgwick fell. Visitors still come to contemplate the site where a brave man's confidence became his epitaph. Did John Sedgwick predict his own death? Not exactly. He did the opposite. He denied the danger right up until the moment it killed him. And perhaps that's the real lesson of his story. War is unpredictable. Courage without caution is recklessness. And sometimes, the elephant is closer than we think. Major General John Sedgwick, born 1813, died 1864. A soldier who served his country with distinction. A general beloved by his men. A man remembered not for how he lived, but for what he said in the last seconds of his life. They couldn't hit an elephant at this distance. He was wrong.